Hey, I'm going to use a bandsaw for a couple projects. My bandsaw is a couple years old. The blade is very dull and it burns wood, but it doesn't cut it. And I haven't really done anything to it in the 2 or 3 years that I've had the bandsaw. So let's give the bandsaw a quick clean and a quick tune-up, sever it up for us so that she's working great. Okay, so there was a bit of surface rust on here. I've taken the majority of it off. There's still a little bit here. I just used some 600 grit sandpaper. You can use pretty much anything. Vinegar works well. You just want to neutralize that with some baking soda, obviously. And the important part is my table is still flat and clean and fairly good to go. It's just drying off now. And when it dries, I'll give it a quick buff to actually clean the metal. And then we're going to just coat it with either some paste wax, or I have a special compound made to prevent rust, and it's non-marking to wood, sticks to the metal, makes it slippery. So the same thing as paste wax, just an industrial concoction. And last thing I'm going to do before I wax the tabletop is just take some acetone, give it a rub down, careful not to get on the plastic, just to degrease the table. Okay, and last thing we want to do is take the table off because it'll actually make cleaning the rest of the saw and setting this up much easier. So every table comes off slightly different. You really need to either Google the owner's manual if you don't have it, or take a look at your table and see how it comes apart. So mine just has a number of screws to set some of the attachments that come off. And same thing, one screw in the back. We'll pull the table off towards the back, towards me. So when we are finished cleaning the saw, we'll get the table back on. We'll show you how to set up a new blade and also make sure everything is straight and true. Hey, so one thing I forgot to say, make sure you unplug your bandsaw before you try any of this work. All right, let's remove the blade. I've done a general vacuum inside. Let's talk a bit about the components and what we can and can't do, or should or shouldn't do inside the bandsaw to tune it up. All right, so for me, detensioning my blade, basically spin this wheel to the top. I've got the guard all the way down just so it's out of the way here. The blade is pretty loose right now. And out she comes. A little bit of a pain through the guard. But not too bad. There we go. And if you want, perhaps you should wear leather gloves for this, because even though the bandsaw blade is dull, it's still sharp enough to do this. There is my thick bandsaw blade. I'm going to put a thinner one on when we replace this in a moment. All right, got some gloves. Safety first. Just a quick way to fold up your bandsaw blades. If you just turn your dominant hand backwards, so both hands are facing the same direction, twist away from you, should roll up nice and easy, like this, fit into itself, and it actually shouldn't come apart. should stay together. If you're concerned, you can hang it on the wall. If you're concerned about it coming apart, you could just tie that with a twist tie. Okay, so basically I've taken some window cleaner, cleaned out the dust from the inside, nothing special. Some bandsaws have these brushes. If you got these brushes, it helps keeps the wheel clean. I have one on the bottom. I don't have one on the top. Most of the dust comes down into here anyway, obviously. The saw blade goes this way. So the dust gets collected into here and sucked out through the vacuum. Basically, all the bearings are sealed, so you don't need to do anything there. If they're leaking or they're wobbly or need grease, then you need to replace your bearing because they're sealed unit. If your bandsaw shakes a lot, one thing you might want to check is your belt tension. So for instance, if I loosen my belts up, it's got a lot of deflection there, and that will make the whole bandsaw shake. Basically, you want about 1/4 inch or 5 to 6 mil of deflection at best. So let's tighten this up. And that's good, nice and tight. The other thing, just checking the wheel rubber themselves. Mine's in good condition on the bottom. It's a bit dirtier, but fair condition on the top, so I don't need to do anything. You can replace the rubber on the wheels, so that will help your bandsaw work properly. But basically not a lot to do. In my case, I could get the vacuum in here and get some more dust out, but the screw that adjusts my motor and belt tension, I could grease that with some heavy duty grease or some gear oil. In this case, it's a cheap unit. It's just going to collect dust, so I'm not going to. And there's no other geared mechanisms in my bandsaw. Your bandsaw may have a number of gears to do some adjustments. If you got it using some normal automotive grease from the tube that you would use into a Zerk fitting, just scrape it out, put it on, you're good to go. So all I'm going to do is take some Windex, clean off the rubber, and do a little bit of final dusting, and then let's look at getting the blade back on. Hey, up here on the top, and I suppose also on the bottom wheel, you want to really check the balance. So first of all, because your wheel is tensioned with the top wheel, your bandsaw blade, don't confuse all this moving around from whatever your tension adjuster looks like as a problem. It's going to do that. It's going to either rock side to side or up and down, like mine, like that. All right. Basically, give it a little spin. Make sure it just stops freely and doesn't all come back to one spot on the wheel. I might have spun a bit too much. So that one's on the bottom. And let's see, make sure it doesn't stay on the bottom. It'll stop somewhere else. So yeah, my wheel's fine. A little bit of dust still right there. But other than that, good to go. So basically, let's get this blade on, adjust this bandsaw to make our work better. Okay, not the easiest to see, but basically we want to loosen all of our guides so nothing's touching the blade. We want the front of the blade to be in the center of the wheel. This is the Alex Snodgrass method. He appears to be like world's best bandsaw tuner. This will make your bandsaw work significantly better. Just give him a Google or a search on YouTube. He's got about a half-hour video on how to set up and use a bandsaw, and it is amazing. So basically, this method will make your bandsaw work way better. And what we start with is everything a bit loose, bandsaw touching nothing, and its front teeth, or actually the base of the kerf, so at the base of the teeth, center of the bandsaw wheel. Okay, a lot of people are concerned if their wheels are code planar. That doesn't matter. It won't make any difference. Like your sandpaper and a belt sander, you just, as long as it's on the drive wheel, it's good, and you need to tilt this top wheel in or out, which mine is just a screw in the back, to make the blade ride where you want it. So let's take a look here. If I spin around, The blade is in the center where we want it of the wheel, which is probably different from what your manual says. And for tension, basically, if I can move it about a 1/4 inch or 5 or 6 mil without hurting myself, it's probably good tension. Okay, so let's look at setting up our guides, and this is a key to the system. Okay, first things first, we're going to do these top bearings. So this moves forward and back. On mine, it's just a bolt on the side, and there we go. So basically, what we need to do is we want these in and out, which I just pull and then lock. In this case, like such. We want them as close as possible to the blade. At the same time, we want them to be just behind the gullet or the bottom of the teeth, like so. I'll give you a shot from the other angle. And this is because the teeth have set. If they're any farther forward, they are going to rub on your bearings and wear them out quickly. Okay, so hopefully you can see there. Basically, we don't want it ahead of the teeth. We want it just behind the gullet. And if I put this one back in, we'll be able to see. So once you have it in that position, we want to lock it in. And for me, that's carefully doing up this nut to tighten the whole thing down, making sure it's just behind the gullet of the teeth, just like so. I might need to nudge it back just slightly. There we go. Okay, so once that's set, unless you change your blade or blade size, and even if you do, you actually shouldn't have to adjust that forward and back ever again, because if the blade's tracking in the center, these will always be in the right spot. Okay, and once we've got the top done, we're just going to do the bottom bearings, move them back in line. We'll worry about the orientation in a minute, because we're going to adjust the thrust bearing after we adjust these guides forward and back. Okay, so now we'll do the thrust bearing. If you have a good bandsaw, you'll have more than one thrust bearing. I just have one on the top guide right here. Basically, we want this bearing to be as close as possible, so a hair's width away from the back of the blade. You can tell mine is way off, although I did move the whole thing back, and I'm using a blade about half as thin as that was on the bandsaw. We'll move this forward to just a hair behind, and then basically as we move the blade, it shouldn't move, but if we give it a slight pressure, it'll move the thrust bearing. Okay, that looks good to me. Let's lock it down. Okay, and as I said, unfortunately, I don't have a bottom thrust bearing, but a lot of you will have a thrust bearing right here. And it may be in this orientation, or like mine, it may be this orientation so the wheel turns. So I don't have one. We're done there. Let's move on. Okay, so top side bearings, basically, we want them close, but not as close as the thrust bearing is. So maybe like 2 hairs away. One good way to do it, let's just push them up against it. The reason this helps with some fishtail, same with the thrust bearing, because the back of the blade can wobble around. These things, we want them close, not as close, because if you go to a turn, we can bind it up, and then we won't be able to do turns on our work. Now, to set them, basically knock them in, and one way is just give it a tap with the saw blade, tap with the saw blade, and that's good. So we'll lock them down, and we'll do the exact same thing on the bottom. So easy to touch them, but they don't touch normally. That's the way to have them set. Okay, so at this point, we're going to put the table back on, and we'll show you how to level it, check the blade. Mine, as you can see from this little divot possibly in the video, Mine has a screw underneath the table. Some have a screw or a bolt with a locking nut that comes up from the table like this. And that's how you adjust your table to 90 degrees. So let's get the table back on and we'll show you how to do a quick adjust to 90 degrees. We'll do a test cut on the saw to make sure everything is good. Okay, so there is the table on. Now let's check it for 90 degrees. Okay, so it might be hard for you guys to see, not quite level. Table needs to shift this way. So I need to screw my bolt in, re-level the table, and check it again. Almost, but not quite there. That looks good to me. Okay, so quick test to see if our blade is straight. Best way, we're just gonna saw a kerf into this piece of wood, turn the bandsaw off, turn it around, and pull it in from the back and see if it still fits. Okay, so we saw our kerf. I'm going to pull it in and see. I'm going to say that does fit well. There's no gaps to the left or right. This wood, hard to cut. As you see, we burnt a bit of that wood. But anyway, that's good. We got it set up. We got a bit of dust on the table saw. Let's get in our fence and see how we've done. Okay, let's move the fence very close to the blade. Starting to tighten it up. Let's move it very close to the blade and see what kind of thin veneer we can cut. Probably in a softer wood than we just did. Okay, because this wood burns a lot, it has cut fairly smooth. And as you see, we cut out this little corner. Let's just check it with the caliper on this end. We're looking at 4.6 mil in the middle, just under 4. On this end, I think this is because the blade guard was a bit too high. 3.6. 4.6. All right, so not ideal, but I'm, well, it might be my using of the caliper, actually. 5.3. All right, 4.4. Very close. 3/100ths of a mil. Give or take. So really, that's pretty good, especially because I was bending the blade. This wood's not exactly flat, as you can see. But look, not perfect. But that's the wood releasing itself as I was cut. All right, so that's it, basically. I guess the only other piece of advice I got is the guard itself. If you move it up and down a lot, depending on the thickness of your cuts, just check that your wheels or your guides are still in the right spot, because sometimes these things, especially older bandsaws, can get warped or bent, so they're not going to have the guides in the same spot. So give that a check. And basically this whole thing took me maybe half an hour with filming and thinking about what I actually needed to do and what I wanted to say. So, you know, clean up your bandsaw, get better cuts, set it up, and it will work much better for you, trust me. All right, thanks for watching. And as always, remember, if you like the video, please hit the like button. and consider subscribing so you can keep up to date on my workshop projects or projects on the boat.